Hey there, Storm fans. Bryant Cook, and today I am showcasing my legacy deck, the Epic Storm. And what that means is I'm showing you my physical copy of the deck. For those of you that are unaware, every single year I upload my deck to the Epic Storm, and I've done so since 2008. If you're interested in checking out those older versions, you can go to the resource library and then just scroll right down to deck showcase updates, and here 2008 all the way up to 2020, and then over the recent years I've started to include other decks. So my Godo EDH deck, Vintage, PL, Modern, and then last year I introduced Pioneer. This year I'll have even more decks. This year I'm doing 10 decks total, and this is going to be across a variety of formats: Pauper, Vintage, Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, EDH. I don't know if I said that one yet, but it's going to have a bunch of them. So every day between now and New Year's Eve, every weekday, I should say, not on the weekends, I will post a new deck showcase. So if you're interested in checking out my physical copies of the decks, check back every day. There will be a new showcase for you to watch. Well, today's is the Epic Storm, and I'm going to do something a little bit different. I've never done this via video, so I'm actually going to talk through some of the stories behind the cards. So if you're interested in checking that out, stick around. If you only want to look at the cards, this link will be in the description below, but also in the pinned comment. So if you just want to look at the cards at your own leisure, hey, I respect that. But I'm going to tell some of the stories. Hopefully you enjoyed them. Let me know. Anyway, so these Burning Wishes, I've actually owned most of these since 2008. When I first decided I was going to, back then it was called pimping out your deck, I made the first step with Burning Wish. Jason Jaco was at a Mana Drain Open, and I traded for a decent amount of cards at the time from Jaco, and I gave up 32 dual lands. At the time, dual lands were not worth a lot of money, and by that I mean they were roughly $15, even for the blue ones. So I traded a bunch of dual lands for a lot of Japanese foils. And at the time, I actually had around 80 dual lands. I had my full set of 40. Even after the trade, I had my full set of 40. I've been playing Magic for a very long time. So I made the jump by trading for Japanese foil Burning Wishes. When I originally got them, there was 2 signed in silver and then 2 unsigned. I still own those original 2, but later on in time, I traded away the ones signed in silver and then got unsigned ones back, and then got the full set signed in black. I like black signatures. That's one thing you'll notice. Non-black signatures actually drive me insane, so I'm not interested if it's in silver. I don't like the drop shadows. I'm a traditionalist. I want original printing, Japanese foil, black signature. That's my thing. So if you're watching these videos, that's what I'm going for. Japanese over foil, if possible. All right. Wishclaw Talisman, a pretty big upgrade to the Epic Storm. I actually made a video somewhat recently, within the last month, with Alex McKinley on how it's been 2 years since we've discovered Wishclaw Talisman in the Epic Storm. You can actually check that out. Whoop, can't see that hand. Check that out in the card above. It's a pretty good watch. It's roughly 30 minutes, and it's highly informational. So if you're interested in the deck building philosophy around Wishclaw Talisman, definitely check that out. But Darkin just signs through the mail. If you contact them, they'll usually respond. I did make an effort to contact them recently about signing some of my Pauper cards. I never heard back. So good luck. I know that Matthew Schneider, who does the Mountain Mage signing group, I'll actually have that link in the section down below as well, has an upcoming signing with Darkin in January. Might be February, but I believe it's January, where I actually plan on sending in some of my cards as well. So if you're interested in getting your own copies of Wishclaw Talisman, definitely do that. Moving on to Burning Wish. So these Burning Wishes, I picked them all up when Brainstorm was restricted in Vintage. I remember being a kid working at Wendy's at the time, and I was only getting $80, $90 per paycheck, and $45 Brainstorms were just way too good to turn up at the time. So I went to eBay, I picked up all 4 Brainstorms one week at a time. Like I would save half my paycheck, grab a Brainstorm, save half my check, grab a Brainstorm. So flipping burgers got me my Brainstorms originally. And then over time, I've got them signed. Dieter Lizzie did it through the mail at the time. I don't believe they signed via mail anymore. So definitely keep a lookout for events that they go to. That's pretty much the only way you can get them signed. In 2015, I actually had one of my Brainstorms damaged at an event. You might remember it. Stuff happens, right? So my card was damaged, and I actually replaced it with another Brainstorm, and I got that Brainstorm signed again. But the mismatching signature always sort of bothered me. It wasn't the same signature. So if you go back to some of my other versions from 2016, 2017, and I believe it even in 2018, we'll have that alternate brainstorm that you will find in my vintage deck now. So when I upload the vintage deck within the next week or so, you can definitely check out the 5th brainstorm or go check out those links. But I ended up buying back the 4th brainstorm. I contacted the person I sold it to. They still owned it. And at a more comfortable point in my life, I decided that I wanted to buy back the brainstorm. So I contacted them. They were more than happy to sell it back to me, but they wanted another brainstorm back. They didn't actually want they didn't want the money. So I had to find a brainstorm, ship them a near mint brainstorm for this damaged one back. And I'll be honest, part of it was for my own mental sake. I felt like I needed to close that chapter in my life, so I wanted to get it back. It is still damaged. You can barely tell here, but there's a crease from here up to here. And back when I sold it, there was this, I tried to keep it for a few days, but I used regular perfect fits at the time. And over the course of a lot of shuffling, you could see slight wear and tear there. But with the invention of hard perfect fits, that doesn't exist anymore. The hard perfects are so good that the slight damage to the card never ends up showing through. So hard perfect fits were actually the difference for me personally. And if you're interested in getting your own hard perfect fits, there will also be a link for those down below in the description too. So if you want to try those, I highly recommend them. They flatten your foils. I've actually bought for my modern deck, well, modern gift storm, I bought a lot of the cards warped. And the hard perfect fits over time completely flatten them. It's not going to be 3 weeks. It's not going to be a month. It'll be 4 or 5 months, but they will completely flatten out. So I definitely recommend the hard perfect fits. These ponders. These are actually the original ponders that I had when they came out for the Epic Storm. And I used these, but I've never been crazy about the art. And that's just me being completely honest. I'm not a fan of merfolk boobs. I'm sorry. It doesn't do it for me. But that said, they are the original printing, and I ended up getting these back years later. At the time, I had traded them to a friend for I believe the first reprint of Ponder was an M10. So my friend had a set of Japanese foil M10 Ponders. I traded it to them, and then immediately they traded those Ponders for something else to someone who occasionally played EDH and some vintage. And a decade went by. Or maybe not a full decade, maybe it was like 8 years. And I saw that that person had posted Ponders for trade. We worked out a deal where I traded them my English Foil Grim Monolith out of my EDH Godo deck, and I got the Ponders in return. And we were talking while we were doing the exchange, and they're like, yeah, I actually got them from this person. And we both like had this look in our eye, like we knew that those were originally my Ponders from, 2008 to 2010. So kind of wild. I ended up getting the same exact Ponders back just years later. And then that same week was the only Eternal Weekend in paper I had ever attended in 2017. So maybe it was 7 years. I'm not sure of the exact math. But I ended up getting them signed the same exact weekend, which is just wild. So the stars aligned. I got back my original Ponders. Kind of a cute story for you. Veil of Summer, a relatively recent print. And what I do with cards nowadays is if I think a card is even closely playable for Storm Combo, I just buy it once it comes out. They enter my collection. Cards don't really leave my collection, if I'm being honest, if I think that they're a Storm card. They just live in my Storm binders. So when I bought the Veil of Summer, I was like, Green Silence, probably not that good, but they're only $2 for Japanese foils. I guess I'll buy a playset. Why I didn't buy 8, I don't know. I wish I did, because they're worth like roughly $160 each now. But I just always buy stuff that I think is going to be playable, even if I'm not sure, because the upside, like Veil of Summer, is just so expensive sometimes. Like I wish that I owned 8 now, but I'm not going to go buy them for how much they're worth. And Lake Hurwitz signs through Mark Aronowitz if you're interested in getting those signed. Mark does regular signings for tons of artists. I sent a lot of my cards to Mark to get signed. So once again, you'll find Mark's information in the description down below. Orm's Chant. These are back from 2007, 2008 when I originally got these. I didn't get them signed until 2018 maybe, but those are my original chants. These are what I played when I top 8'd Grand Prix Columbus back in 2010. There was one chant, I believe, in that list, but was one of these. I know that for sure because I've owned these forever. I actually ended up picking up a third Orem's chant that is not signed, unfortunately, from Brandon Chang, or well, sort of from Brandon Chang, if you know him. We were both looking at cards at MTG deals at Grand Prix Niagara Falls, and there was a Japanese foil Orem's chant in the case for $6. And I was like, I'd like to purchase this. I go to hand them my credit card. They're like, oh, no credit card. I was like, can I PayPal you? They're like, no. So Brandon Chang, out of the kindness of his heart, says, I've got it. Don't worry about it. Handed them $6. Brandon, thank you. I now own a third Japanese foil Orem's chant. And I'd like to get it signed at some point, but the way that Kev Walker does signatures now is it's a little bit different. There's a big swoosh. And if you want to compare it, let's jump ahead. Ooh, that scaled weirdly. I'm zoomed in, so the scaling here is a little odd. Sorry about that. But here's the new signature. There's like this big swoosh around the Kev Walker. So even if I get it signed, it will never be the same signature, which is kind of a bummer. Okay, let's go back to Orem's chant. The Ad Nauseum. I've owned this also since the original. I have a second Ad Nauseum that if I ever meet Jeremy Jarmus, I would like to get signed. I don't love this signature. It's like with a really thin, almost ballpoint pen type marker. It's tough to see. I'd really like to get a nice thick black marker signature Ad Nauseum. So if I ever meet Jeremy Jarvis, I cannot wait to get it signed. But until then, it's going to live in my storm binder. Therese Nielsen, Echo of Aeons, beautiful art, nice signature. Not a whole lot to say about that. Rite of Flame. These are the second set of Rite of Flames I've ever owned. The original set went to Tony Laverde, who used to write for theepicstorm.com, and he has my original set. I probably got the original signed in like 2014, and then a friend of mine got their Rite of Flame signed in 2018 and sent me a picture, and I was like, I have to have that. Danny Orazito signs once a year at Nebraska's War, which is an event in Italy every year. So I sent these out to get signed at that. They came back, and they're just beautiful. These are some of my favorite cards that I own. Like, that signature is just so lovely. I love it. Yeah. Dark Rituals. These, like the Brainstorms, were cards that I had to buy one paycheck at a time from working at Wendy's. The first three were roughly $60 each. They were more expensive than Brainstorm at the time. And then the fourth Dark Ritual here, you could tell because there's a couple nicks up here. The back of it's actually just really beat. These are the Dark Rituals I've owned my entire time. They're signed by Rebecca Guay. They look beautiful. But it's kind of weird the way that Brainstorm is compared in price to Dark Ritual over the years. Like, Japanese foil Brainstorms now are like $400. You can maybe get like not great condition ones at like $350. But if you want near mint Brainstorms, they're like $450. Dark Ritual for most of my life has been between $60 and $80. Only recently have they spiked. It's just so weird that Brainstorm had this, really big jump, but Dark Ritual just never had that same trajectory until recently, and I've always thought that was kind of odd. Margaret Organ Keene, Lion's Eye Diamond. And these Lion's Eyes I got signed early on. I think it was like 2013 or 2012. I decided I was going to get my deck signed. And I contacted Margaret through email, and I found her information just through a quick Google search, which is what I would recommend doing for most artists, by the way. Just contact them through their site or group signings, whatever. And when I contacted Margaret, she's like, oh, I'd love to sign your cards. Just make sure to send a tip. And at the time, I was young. I was out of college. I was making literally $30,000 a year while paying back very expensive student loans. But I thought the Lion's Eye Diamonds were so special that I wanted to do something nice. So when I shipped out the diamonds, I sent $30 with the cards just for the 4 diamonds. And Margaret wrote me a letter back that I still own, saying that she was going to use that money for bus fare to go to the hospital to get her treatments done. And I was just like, I did not pay enough. So if you ever decide to send cards to Margaret, please overtip. That's my message here. It doesn't hurt to do something nice for others. So if you're going to get your card signed, tip well. April Lee and Lotus Petal. Unfortunately, April Lee doesn't sign anymore. I don't know the details of why, but I got these signed via a friend from college, right after college, Randy Belcher. Randy, thank you for getting these signed for me. You were crucial. But April doesn't sign anymore. And signed Lotus Petals just go for a bunch. I actually needed one for my commander deck. And it's signed in silver. And as I mentioned in the intro, I hate silver. I'd really like to find someone that wants to swap it for one in black. But signed Lotus Petals, just like, they're so difficult to come by, especially when they're Japanese. I ended up spending like $90 on that fifth Lotus Petal, when a Japanese Lotus Petal by itself, without the signature, is like 15 or 20. So the signature really does increase the price of these cards. Chrome Mox, these are also cards that I've just owned forever. Donato Giancola, and they signed via mail. I'll probably sign. I have something else by them that I need to get signed. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but they live in New York City. They're very quick to respond. Every time I've mailed to them, which has been a few times in my life, maybe 3 or 4, I've got it back within 3 weeks. So they're very quick to move if you're interested in getting your Chrome Moxes signed. Tendrils of Agony. So this is probably the third Tendrils of Agony I've ever owned. The Massacre, a Flame Tongue Kavu, and something else were the first cards I ever sent to get signed out by Pete Venters. And I just followed what people were saying in the signing groups. I shipped in a plain white envelope at the time. I taped it to the paper in the envelope, but when Pete mailed back to me, Pete did not tape it to the envelope, and I lost the Tendrils, the Massacre, the Flame Tongue, and something else. And I wasn't making a lot of money at the time. I was quite heartbroken, so I had to save up, get those cards back again. And I ended up getting this Tendrils and then the Sideboard Tendrils later on signed. But I was really devastated for a while, but it's worth it. I'd pay that money all over again to get this signed. Like, it's just a beautiful card. Look at that signature. No fault of Pete either, by the way. It is not Pete's responsibility to ship back to me in something better than a plain white envelope or to tape it. So if you're shipping out cards, use a bubble mailer, and then put another bubble mailer in there. So what I do is I buy slightly larger bubble mailers and then put smaller ones in. So if you ship in plain white envelope, it's your own fault if things don't come back. Mox Opal. So I got these off of Juan Valdez. There was a fear at the time that they were going to be banned in Modern, and Juan was looking to dump these, and I was interested, but I wasn't willing to pay the Modern price at the time. So we ended up coming to a deal. I ended up spending more money than I wanted to on these, but I just sold cards to get them back. And look at that Vulcan Baga signature. Like, it's just amazing. It's just so beautiful. So there is a fourth one. It's in the extras down below, but these are, once again, some of my most favorite cards that I own. I have a bunch of favorite cards, so that, ignore me, but wow, they're just awesome. Advanced Core, I don't know how to say their last name, Corvax. I've tried to contact them dozens of times, and they don't even see that, like, because when you contact them through Facebook, you can see if they've read your message. Vance just, I cannot get a hold of him. And they do art, like, events in LA, but LA is on the opposite side of the country. I'm not going to fly out there for them. But they do go to Nebraska's war. So if we ever get out of COVID, I'll probably send these with a friend going to Nebraska's war to get signed. They're one of the few cards I need left to get signed in this deck. And I'm tired of bothering Vance trying to get them signed. So if you're an artist agent and you're watching this, if you can make it happen, I will tip you very well to get these signed. I've offered a bunch of money to different people. They've never been able to make it happen. It is what it is. Jack Stanton did a signing for Philip Straub a couple years ago, and then Jack sort of disappeared right after. And I'm just thankful that my turns came back before Jack disappeared. I have no ill will towards Jack. I did lose 3 Japanese foil Abrade when Jack disappeared, but in the grand scheme of things, Jack got an almost impossible signature for me for the cost of the $30 for the Abrades. That's the way that I look at it. Because I own 6 Japanese foil Scalding Tarns, and all 6 got signed. And Philip Straub, I don't know if they've signed since then. Maybe they have. I'm not sure. But at the time, Philip Straub was a white whale. Like, they just would not sign, would not respond to email. So thank you, Jack. My Polluted Deltas. Shout out to Marshall Arthurs, who ended up selling me these. I don't know why I did air quotes. These Polluted Deltas. It happened at GPDC in like 2018. My now wife, but girlfriend at the time, was very surprised at how much I spent on those. At the time, this is not a joke. I had not paid for hotel or gas for the trip yet, and I owned $4,200 in my bank account. That was it. I did not have a credit card, and Marshall wanted $4,500. and I very clearly couldn't afford it. And then I told Marshall, hey, I can't afford it. I could offer 4,000. That leaves me with 200 to pay my friends for the weekend, and then like a little bit of money to get me by until the next weekend. And Marshall's like, no, I can't do it. Uh, Marshall came back with 4,300. I said I can't do it, and then Marshall came back with 41. So I ended up living with $100 for about a week. But the first thing I did when I got home is I opened up all of my binders and I just started pulling cards out. And I had 4 foil Creeping Tar Pits at the time, foil Exalted Angels, just like a bunch of foils I had never used. And I ended up posting a huge for sale list. And within 3 weeks, I had made that $4,000 back just by selling cards that I had never used ever. So, super good investment for me. I did have to live by the skin of my teeth for a week or so, but wow. And you might think that I'm a crazy person for doing that, but I knew a good opportunity when I saw it. These deltas, one sold for $5,000 in the Japanese group over COVID this year. So a single polluted delta is now worth more than what I bought the full set for. They're just super hard to find. That's pretty much what I have to say about it. Marshall now has another set of deltas. Marshall, I do appreciate you. I'm not trying to poke fun here. Thank you. And then all of my dual lands, they're German, different artists. I've gotten all of them signed in person for the most part. This, I do have 2 German Badlands. This one is not the one that I got signed in person, though. This one I bought pre-signed. It's just that the signature of the one that I got signed, the marker wasn't great, so I ended up buying another one. And I do own a full set of 40 Japanese FBBs, 4 in black border dual lands. Not all of them are German though. I have like at least 1 German of each, but then a couple of them are like Italian. When I started getting these FBBs, it was like 2008 to 2011, and I just wasn't smart enough to pick a language at the time. So it's just like, oh, as long as it has a black border, it's fine. So my 40 FBBs are sort of mismatched disasters. I didn't know any better at the time. Not going to correct it now. They're just worth way too much money. Like when I got this FBBC, it was $90. There was a point this year where they were $2,400 on eBay. They've come down since then, but the price of this stuff is just too ridiculous. And if I didn't buy most of it when it came out, I probably wouldn't own this stuff because I'm not rich. I know that it might seem like I have a lot of money based on these cards. I really don't. I make a modest amount per year. I mean, I'm a web designer. But a lot of it's just, I like to spend Magic on, like when I win stuff through Magic, I put it back into Magic. So if I see something I want, I get it with winnings. I don't try to spend too much of my personal money on this stuff outside of the deltas. But even then, with the deltas, I sold the stuff back so that way Magic was paying for Magic. The dividers. So this is just the back of the original mini token pack. And the rest of the original mini token pack is down here. And I don't own these anymore. Like you cannot get these from me. They're not for sale. But the backs of them were the Epic Storm logo, and I keep one backwards. There's like one of that's my dumb face, but I like having like an Epic Storm deck divider. Like for some reason it makes me happy, so I always keep that one backwards. Spike Tournament Grinder. This one came later, but for years I had Johnny, Cheaty Face, Mize in my deck dividers as like cute little fun cards. And when Spike came out, I was like, I am a Spike Johnny hybrid. That is who I am. So I decided that I need to get a Spike to pair with my Johnny. And I think I just got that signed through a group signing, so there's nothing special there. Story. The Johnny combo player, those things back when I got them, I have like 3 or 4 of them foil. They were like $15 each. I don't know what they are anymore, but I should probably get more of them. In Kensuke at the time, I don't know if they still are, was living in New York, and I sent them cards. I live in New York State, by the way, but I live upstate. I sent them the cards to get signed, and when they sent them back, they got lost. And I was like, oh no. So I ended up buying 2 more, sent those out to get signed, and then I got the second batch back, and then like 4 months later, I got the original back. The originals back as well. So I own like 4 of them now. But for some reason, they just got lost in the mail for like 4 or 5 months. And it was kind of wild considering I only live like 4 hours away. Weird stuff happens. Cheaty Face Alex Bernicini signed Cheaty Face. Alex has seen my deck over the years. We're both originally from New York. I think Alex has moved away at this point. But Alex knew that I was trying to get my deck signed and that I wanted everything to be complete. But Doug Chaffee unfortunately passed away in 2001. Alex was honored to sign my Cheaty Face, didn't think that I was trying to poke fun at him. And honestly, I wasn't. Alex was super thrilled to be a part of my deck. So thanks to Alex, probably the most notorious cheater in Magic the Gathering. And I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just like the truth here. But thanks to Alex for signing that. Mize. When I was a kid, the term Mize was used a lot. So I started playing Magic in Invasion Block. So around 2001, 2002. And people would always be like, oh, you Mized that, as in like top decked. And Mize comes from that. And I just remember people being very salty whenever they said that sort of stuff. So I like keeping one in my deck box. I don't know. It's just a thing to remind me of being a kid. Crowstorm. Why isn't this a real card? It's kind of BS, right? Like, that card is not too good to be a real card. I really wish they would turn it into one. But I ended up getting these signed through group signings. TW Yang, or YW Tang. I can't read it from here, I'm sorry. They also did Gurmag Angler, which is the card they're most notably known for. I believe when I sent in my Crowstorm, I was the only one that sent in Crowstorm to get signed. Everybody else had sent in Gurmag Anglers. So it's kind of wild. Super Secret Tech, Dan Frazier. I've owned this thing forever. Like, I think I got this when this set came out. Like, I opened this foil. I only own the one, but I got it signed by Dan Frazier, who does all of the Moxen. It's just a really sweet card. Shout outs to Dan. Signed some swamps for me years later and just doodled on them, even though I didn't ask them to. Pretty cool stuff. Rock, Paper, Scissors, Heather Hudson. She does sign by mail. Not a whole lot to say here. I know that like sometimes people look at these things and then see that I have them. I'm not actually interested in using these to determine who goes first. I know that's what they're used for all the time. I don't like doing that. It feels sketchy to me. There's always some sort of way to game it. Don't tell me that there isn't. Like, people have marked sleeves and stuff. I don't want to do it. And then I mentioned the token pack, and then these goblin tokens. These were actually gone for an entire year getting signed. But they're worth it. They're just so beautiful. And Kev Walker, these are the recent signatures. Modern Horizons 2 is actually the first time that a goblin token had been Japanese foil. So these are the first ever Japanese foil goblin tokens signed by Kev Walker. And yeah, if you're interested in getting yours signed, Casey Petrello does them. If you just type in like Casey Petrello signed into Facebook, you should see their Facebook group, or like Kev Walker signed. It will pop up. Playing your favorite combo deck in paper just got so much easier with the Epic Storm Mini Token Pack. You can pick one up at theepicstorm.com/shop for $13. It includes 64 double-sided mini tokens. That's 128 tokens total. And they include 10 black, 10 blue, 10 red, 5 green, 5 white, 3 colorless, 20 storm counters. That means that you can count your way all the way up to 20 for Grape Shot, everyone's favorite Stormwind condition, a Galvanic Relay Exile Indicator, 4 treasure tokens for Strike It Rich, and then 10 monk tokens for our vintage friends. It also has Slime Time Live, Ave Progenitor Ooze tokens with the power and toughness already built in to make playing in paper so much easier. No fumbling around with dice. We've got you covered. Make sure to go grab those if you're playing Modern. And then Squirrels versus Goblins, Chatterstorm versus Empty the Warrens, the Battle of the Ages. You definitely need 20 Squirrel tokens and 20 Goblin tokens. You're going to love this mini token pack, I promise. And once again, you can grab that at theepicstorm.com/shop. The Sideboard, Galvanic Relay, aka Red Necro. Kind of cool. These cards came out this year. This is Modern Horizons 2 by Lucas Stankic. I believe I pronounced it correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't, Lucas. But Lucas told me that these were actually the first cards ever signed by him. And I thought that was really sweet. Lucas was overly nice to me. Really great person. So if you're interested, definitely contact Lucas to get your relay signed. But yeah. Prismatic Ending, John Stanko. These are actually on their way back to me. I scanned these before I sent them out and then photoshopped it onto this Abrupt Decay one that I put in placeholders here. But these are actually on their way back to me. I was hoping to get them back this week. They just didn't arrive in time, so I'm sorry you don't get to see the signed ones. Maybe next year. Uh, but they are signed. They're just on their way back to me, which means that just these and then this Peer into the Abyss, which is also on the way back to me, are the only cards that need to be signed. So at this point, it's really just getting these Verdants signed, and then the Epic Storm will be 100% Japanese foil signed where it can be. And I say that because the German duels are obviously non-foil, non-Japanese, but whatever can be Japanese foil signed is. Abrupt Decay, I've owned these for years. Paul Barney got these signed for me at Grand Prix London, I believe it was, in like 2016. Thanks, Paul. I do appreciate you. Grape Shot, I've owned these forever. That was the last card I signed with Pete Venters. That's what it was. How can I forget Grape Shot? It's literally my favorite card in Magic the Gathering. And those were one of the cards that got lost. But at the time, Grape Shots were like $15 for a Japanese foil, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But the tendrils have always been pretty expensive. As long as I can remember, they've always been at least 100. I think they're like 150 now, but like that's another card where it's really never gone up that much in value compared to other stuff. Empty the Warrens. So these are another one of those cards where I met someone later on in life where they showed me their signatures, and I was like, why aren't my signed like that? I want that signature on my empty. So we're going to jump down real quick to Empty the Warrens. Come on, where's red? So these were the first two that I owned. And you can see that they're done with like a really thin marker, sort of like that Ad Nauseam, where they're really thin and hard to see. And then I bought two more because AJ Kerrigan convinced me that 4 Empty the Warrens was the right number in the Epic Storm, and AJ was right. AJ was not wrong. So I ended up buying two more and sent those out to get signed by Mark Brill, and this time a slightly thicker marker. And I used these 4 empties until like 2017 or 2018 when I contacted Mark Brill about getting a second set signed. And Mark signed them like this, and I just love the signature big in the text box. It just looks so beautiful. So I now own 8 Japanese foil empties. There is a time period in 2018 where I was actually using all 8 at the same time because I was playing 4 in my Gift Storm deck, and I was on a real heater in 2018. So yeah, I mean, empty is a great card, and I don't like swapping cards between decks. So I own 8 Japanese foil empties. I'm probably never going to get rid of them. Please don't contact me about it. So I've had that happen before, which is why I mention it. I'm keeping them. Massacre. So the massacres in this are actually the 3rd and 4th massacres that I own. So I mentioned the one that got lost with Pete Venters the first time. The second one I sent to an artist agent, and they shipped it to my old address, even though I had given them my current one. So it went back to the old address. I sheepishly went and knocked on my old address on the door, and they're just like, oh, it looked like trash, so I threw it away. It happens sometimes. So I ended up buying 2 more massacres and getting them signed in person. I decided that I wasn't going to risk it later because I went for a couple years without playing the card. So I decided I didn't need to purchase it right away because they are like a $40 card. But years later, I ended up getting them signed. So it happens. And then I talked about the Pure already. So we've gone through our entire 75. So this is our main deck, our dividers, and then our sideboard. Everything else from here on out is just extras. So these are cards that might be swapped into the Epic Storm at some point in time, or cards I used to play. Some cards I'll probably never ever play again, but these are cards that I still own because in my mind, they are Epic Storm cards. Infernal Tutor. These are back when I mentioned getting the originals from Jason Jaco. Jason had 3 tutors. I ended up having to find a 4th. So I think in my first scan from 2008, there was like a simplified Chinese foil Infernal Tutor. And later on in time, I actually ended up getting the 4th. But you'll notice here, this is the original Kev Walker signature. I got these signed at the same time I got the Chant signed. Yeah, and these things are crazy expensive now. They're like $700 each. But back when I got these were literally $10 each. That's how long that I've owned them. Yeah, so good luck if you're looking for Infernal Tutors. They're pretty much impossible to find. They've never been reprinted. They're super expensive. Yeah, good luck. Dark Petition. So I got these 2 signed. Foolishly, I didn't buy 4 when it came out because I was like, oh, I'm only going to need 1. I'll buy 1, send 1 out to get signed. I'll have an extra. And then once that original one comes back, I'll send the other out to get signed. was just a bad way of doing things at the time, but I was tight on money. So I have 2 that are signed, and then like I just haven't been able to get into a group signing since then for these 2. But I don't know if I'll ever play for Dark Petition or Dark Petition ever again. So I'm not super excited to spend like $8 each to get these signed. Maybe in the future. All right, Infernal Contract. This is a card that when I started playing the Epic Storm, it was a common card in combo deck. So what people now think of as the Spanish Inquisition was actually called Draw 4 or Uno at the time. And I had played a lot of that deck before creating the Epic Storm. So Infernal Contract was in a lot of the earlier lists of this deck before Ad Nauseam. And I've always wanted to own a Japanese foil one, but somebody in, I believe, Thailand collects Japanese foil Infernal Contracts, so they just like don't exist. Like they've posted their collection online before. It's like over 200 Japanese foils, and they're just super hard to find. So when one popped up on eBay for $33, I immediately bought it. Didn't think twice, I just bought it. It's not even like a playable card anymore. It's just that the fact that they don't exist. And it's a card I bought this year. I don't know if that person still plays Magic or still collecting them, but I couldn't believe that one actually hit eBay, and I was just very thankful to be able to buy it. Ill-Gotten Gains. By the time I had purchased these are the conspiracy prints. These are the first ever prints for this card in Japanese foil. It had been years since I played Ill-Gotten Gains, like actual years, like 7, 8 years maybe. I think the conspiracy set came out in like 2017 or 2018, but I was long gone from Ill-Gotten Gains. But I still picked these up. They were like $1 each for Japanese foils. And then I saw Greg Staples at Grand Prix Vegas when they had the triple main event, and Greg signed them there. It's the entire story behind them. Not that interesting. Brain Spoil. Back before Dark Petition, people used to like to talk about Brain Spoil in the sideboard of the Epic Storm. It's a sorcery. So the idea is that it's like a Grim Tutor for exactly Ad Nauseam. Because back then, a lot of people would try to sideboard an Infernal Tutor to get the main deck Ad Nauseam with Burning Wish. Ad Nauseam is an instant, so that was the whole idea behind it. I don't think I've ever actually played it in a tournament, but I own a Japanese full signed Brain Spoil. Funny how things work out. And here's my unsigned Ad Nauseam that I would like to get signed by Jeremy Jarvis at some point. These are a scan that I did probably 3 months ago at this point. These are out being signed. I love Bolossa Citadel. Not really a Legacy Storm card, but Force of Vigor just wrecks it. But in my mind, I bought these for the Epic Storm, and then they just happened to be an insane Tinker target, which is what happened. But hey, maybe one day, right? You never know. Thoughtseize. These I bought because if you remember this, or you can go look it up, whatever, I don't care what you do. When Gitaxian Pro was banned, in the announcement before the banning, they hinted at the fact that they were looking at Probe. And I said, oh crap, I need to get Thoughtseizes. So I ended up buying these in that short, like 3-month period between the announcements. I spent $450 on the first 2, $500 on the third one, and then $550 on the fourth one. And since then, these are now like $1,200-ish if you're looking to buy them. And Alexi signs via mail and got these back to me within like 2 weeks. I expressed it there, and then I told Alexi, hey, you don't have to do any special shipping back. Let me know what your fee is. I paid them for the signatures. I tipped them well, and then they expressed them back to me, which ended up being more than what I tipped them. I offered to pay it back, and they're like, no, don't worry about it. Really nice of them, but I wish they would have accepted my tip back. I feel bad that the artist paid money. I don't like that, but they wouldn't accept it. So these are much nicer in person. The scans actually look a little bit dark. In person, these are beautiful. Like, just drop dead gorgeous. The Duresses are one of the few cards in this deck that I actually bought pre-signed. I bought them from someone from the Philippines. They were just looking to dump them. They wanted $180 for the set, and at the time, Duresses were roughly $65 on eBay, so it just seemed like a no-brainer to me to get a full set already pre-signed. Not a real crazy story. When I think of Duress, I don't think of this art. I actually think of the Urza's, I believe it's Saga, or yeah, I believe it's Saga, Urza Saga Duress. That's the art that I think of in my head. not the 7th edition Duress, even though 7th was much closer to Invasion Block when I started playing. That said, the original Saga Duress doesn't come Japanese foil. You can now get it as like a special promo, but it's new frame. So these are the original Duress, in my opinion, for Japanese foil. Cabal Therapy from the Black Belcher time period, where we played 4 Empty the Warrens in our deck, 4 Cabal Therapy, and 4 Gataxian Probe. The Triforce is what people used to call it. And we joked that we were Black Belcher because we had Duress, we had Cabal Therapy, and we just shredded people's hands with Empty plus Therapy. I miss that era of the deck, but we're long past it. And honestly, I think the Wishclaw era is a better version of the deck. People online don't agree, but it is what it is. Inquisition of Kozilek. I bought these as an answer. It's going to sound dumb. But when Thalia came out, I was like, okay, well, I can sideboard into Inquisitions and discard them. They don't need to ever hit Forcible in those matchups. That plan was not very good. It was pretty stinky. I should have just, like, sucked it up and, like, ran the Chain of Vapors. But at the time, I was really anti-Bounce Spell. It was just, like, a weakness in my play. So I was like, no, Bounce Spells stink. I don't want to play them. So I just ran, like, a bunch of, like... At the time, I ran like Shattering Spree and I ran Actual Removal. I never liked Bounce Spells at the time, and it was just a fatal flaw in my game plan. And I remember I played Inquisitions at Grand Prix Indianapolis in 2011, also known as Grand Prix Thalia, and I just got destroyed by Death and Taxes like the entire event. Yeah. So don't let your personal biases influence good deck building. That's the real lesson there. Surgicals. Got these signed over. These actually got signed at the same time as the Ill-Gotten Gains. These via the mail. These are reprint surgicals. I don't know. I don't have a good excuse. The new Phyrexian ones were just super expensive for a card that I never thought was really going to stick in the deck. So I ended up getting these. Do I wish that they were new Phyrexia? Sure, but honestly, I don't care. If you want to argue that, these are technically new Phyrexia, even though they are the box toppers. I also like this art a lot more than I like this art, for what it's worth. I don't care. These are probably cards that, like, I'm not playing unless the metagame's super unhealthy. And if that is the case, then I don't know. Like, the Epic Storm is probably not that well positioned. Reign of Filth. So Steve and Danielle used to sign via mail. They no longer do that. You have to sign through their agent. They live in Seattle, or at least did when I got mine signed. Their agent is now in Italy, so you have to send your cards to Italy to then have them ship it to Seattle to sign, to go back to Italy to come back to you. It's just a really long trip. I don't know. I ended up buying a signed Tolarian Academy, so I didn't have to go through that whole mess. So good luck getting your Reign of Filth signed if that's something you're interested in. Hey, you're still watching. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you're looking to make a purchase from Card Hoarder, TCG Player, or Amazon and are looking to support us, you can open up our description down below, and in there you will find our affiliate links. Those same links are found on the homepage of the Epic Storm. But that's not all. We've included a Card Hoarder button on our website that will load the Epic Storm in your Card Hoarder cart to make life simple for you. Cabal Ritual. So Cabal Ritual, I don't know if you can actually tell, but the signatures aren't exactly the same. So the first Cabal Ritual and the fourth Cabal Ritual, those are the same signing. And then these middle two are the same signing. I don't think anyone would really notice for the most part, but I did get these signed at 2 different times. I didn't own 4 originally. I was sort of in the mindset of I'll only ever need 2 Cabal Rituals. I'm never going to play Ant. And that just wasn't true. I ended up wanting 4 Cabal Rituals later on in time. I play 4 in Cycle Storm now, and that's where these Cabal Rituals actually live for the most part. Yeah, not a super interesting story. I do know that I believe it's Tim is no longer with us, so Greg signs all of them, but Greg doesn't like signing the same card more than once. So if you want to get multiple signed, maybe you can do it through artist agents now, or you have to go to AlexCon. And I got mine signed at AlexCon. It's held in the middle of Pennsylvania these days, but that's a way of doing it. Fatal Push. Everyone thought this card was going to be like a Storm Savior or a Storm Staple. It was never quite good enough, and I think part of the reason why is that Chain of Vapor is just more versatile. By that time, I came around on Chain of Vapor being a really good card, but Fatal Push is like a fine card, but I don't know, not answering deafening sounds or Chalice of the Void or whatever. It's just like kind of awkward. So it is good, but I don't know if I'm ever actually going to play it in the Epic Storm. At the time, it was good because you could cast it off Basic Swamp, but like we're not even playing Basic Swamp anymore. Yeah. Dread of Night, a similar thing where like this card used to be a Haymaker, but that was before Deafening Silence. So you're kind of playing the wrong game if you're playing Dread of Night because you want your cards to answer everything your opponent does. And like imagine you go turn one Dread of Night and they go turn one Deafening Silence. They will draw out of their situation way easier than we will, especially in an era where they have Skyclave Apparition. So it's just really, really embarrassing. Plus, it doesn't beat things like Ethersworn Canonist. Dread of Night's just an era of the past. If you're still playing this card, I'd reevaluate. Deathmark. This was one of those cards that when I was anti-Chain of Vapor that I played, because it just removed Thalia cleanly, and that's what mattered. It did not. It was just a mistake. I should not have been playing these. Plus, the signature on these is with a ballpoint pen. It just looks bad. Another Massacre, and then Sadistic Sacrament. I actually bought this like years after I played it. I bought it for like $5 and then got it signed in person. It's a cool looking card, but ultimately probably worse than Extract. Chippy's Gitaxian Probes. Sort of one of my white whales. I've always wanted to get these signed. I played them for years. Chippy just like... Their real name is Brian Dugan, which is the name of like a serial killer. And so you go by Chippy. They work for Valve. The last time I knew, I contacted Valve, couldn't get a hold of... Like, Chippy's just an impossible person to get signatures from. And I've just tried for years to get... I've done so much research. It's just never going to happen. Maybe they'll go to a Grand Prix one day, but sort of disappointed. Like, these and the Baubles are cards that I would love to get signed, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Yeah. And there was some, like, people hold on to silly stuff, too. Like, I've mentioned this on the Eternal Glory podcast, but when Probe first came out, I was like, why would I want to shock myself to look at my opponent's hand? I'm the Ad Nauseam deck. I'm running City of Brass. I don't really want to pay 2 life to shock myself. And people use that as, like, fuel or ammo against me for years when it's silly because, like, you're allowed to reevaluate your initial thoughts. So don't double down on bad opinions that you had. It's just silly. Like, if you're wrong about something, accept it and move on. Like, I learned that Probe was really good, so I just played it for the next 7 years or whatever until it got banned. Just because you have an initial opinion doesn't mean that you need to die on that hill. These are the Ponders that I got replaced with the Ponders I told the story above. I still own these. These are now in my Pauper Twiddlestorm deck. I don't know. Probably never going to use these again in the deck, but hey, let's show them off. Preordain. So I legitimately thought that there was a time in like 2012 or 2013 during the height of the Star City Games era where we had Sunday Legacy every single weekend that Brainstorm was going to get banned. And I was like, okay, I should pick up a set of Preordains. At the time, I spent like $180 on the set. I traded like 2 foil Misty Rainforest for them. I didn't actually spend that much money. And I got these. And since then, I mean, I haven't looked up the price recently, but there was a time period where they were like $380 each. I don't know if that's still true, but there was definitely a time period a few years ago where it was. It's been reprinted since then, I believe, in like a few like Commander decks or something, but I don't know. These are just like also really nice in real life. The scans don't do them justice. Windfall. Scott Murphy. Scott is the best. So Scott lives in Massachusetts. I live in New York. I've sent Scott a couple packages at this point. The last few have been Pauper, but Scott's just really quick to sign and turn around. Really easy to work with. You know, props. And Windfall's a card I think could be unbanned, which is why I ended up buying these. I know people are like, why wouldn't you get the originals? The originals don't come Japanese foil. That's it. I love the original art, but non-Japanese foil. So Wizards unban Windfall is just worse than what we have now. Diminishing Returns. Much like the Ill-Gotten Gains, this actually came after the Ill-Gotten Gains and Eternal Masters, where Greg Opolinski, who used to live in New York City, I believe they've moved, signed via mail. And Greg signed these, was super nice about it. I think on the first Diminishing Returns, I spent like $15. And then I waited like 2 weeks and I bought the second one for literally $1. Where if I just waited a few weeks on the first one, I wouldn't have felt so foolish. But yeah, I own Japanese foil Diminishing Returns. And unlike Ill-Gotten Gains, I did try these again. There's this like weird time period in 2018 before, or maybe it was 2019, before Echo of Aeons, where we had decided to cut past In Flames pre-Echo. There was this time period where we were trying Telemann Performance, Mizzix Mastery, Diminishing Returns, a bunch of stuff in that slot again. And I did try Returns. It wasn't good, but I did try it again. Slither Muse. So this card I keep for like personal fun reasons. I don't think it's actually that good. But when it was spoiled, it had the same mana cost as Windfall. So it was 2 and a blue back during the era in which people would refresh MTG Salvation over and over and over again. And when it was spoiled, it was just strictly better Windfall. It was one-sided. And when it was original, and then once it was revealed that it was 4 mana, everybody lost their excitement. I ended up getting one for like literally $1 and like got it signed in person. I think maybe I sent it through mail. I don't remember, but it's sort of just like fun to poke back and think of it at the time. And if I remember correctly, it was like around that time period that the Rancor person ended up getting like fined by Wizards for leaking card information or something. Such a weird era to think back to now, where Wizards gives cards to people to preview online. Just like very different eras. Telemann Performance. There was a time period where this card was just like win the game in the mirror match because neither deck played creatures. It was a KO against lands. Reanimator was really good. I think ultimately we've moved past this card ever being playable again, because there was a long time where the Epic Storm lacked a good wish target, where against decks where Empty the Warrens and Past in Flames were bad. So we ran this Telemann Performance because it was something else you could do that didn't lose to crop rotation, which was the big thing, because crop rotation could get Tabernacle or it could get Bazooka Bog. Well, now we have Peer into the Abyss, so you just never need to do that. You don't need something like Telemann Performance. It's just ultimately too cute. But I had a lot of fun decking people at the time. I do have a screenshot saved somewhere of me decking Solidarity and then tagging my friend Marcus on Twitter or Facebook, because Marcus is a High Tide player. So Marcus, the Epic Storm is the real mill deck. That's what I'm trying to say here. Mind's Desire. So these are cards that could probably be unbanned in Legacy, in my opinion. I'm going to sound like you're not going to believe me, but this card is worse than Galvanic Relay. It's way more difficult to cast. It's so expensive, so it doesn't work well in your Ad Nauseam deck. I understand that you can like Mizzix Mastery back your Mind's Desire, or people that are out or are older will think of Sins of the Past. Mind's Desire is just so clunky. Like, that's the real issue with it, is that you need blue. In order to support blue, you'd have to run things like Manamorphose, because like in your Dark Ritual decks, it's not easy to come up with a spare blue. Like, yes, you can open double Lotus Petal, but if you're going to do that, you have to make yourself weak to Force of Will. And if you're making yourself not weak to Force of Will, it takes more time, which is what ideally you'd want the Storm deck to do anyways, give people more time to interact with it. So I have a big speech about this. It's like episode 10 of the Eternal Glory podcast, back when it was Wilson and Anurag as my co-host. But it's talking about like the state of combo. And I give this like love letter to Mind's Desire in there. If you're interested in that, definitely go check it out. Repeal. There was a time period where when I started testing Mox Opal, I thought Repeal might have been the perfect bounce spell for the Epic Storm. Unfortunately, I just don't think that's true. It's really, really bad against Thalia. Needing 3 mana to bounce a Thalia is just really difficult. It does bounce Deafening Silence well. You can bounce your own Opals and Cantrip. I wish it was better in Legacy. I just don't think it's quite good enough. Chain of Vapor. I love this card. I really do. But Prismatic Ending is just so much better, and that's caused us to shelve Chain of Vapor for a little bit. I wish that Chain of Vapor was added into Modern, because in Modern I'm actually playing a bunch of Void Snares, and I wish that they were chained. So Wizards, if you're listening, put Chain of Vapor into Modern, please. And then Void Snare itself, the sorcery speed bounce spell, you can get it with Burning Wish. A lot of people often ask why we don't play it. It's just too cute. And if you want to do cute things, hey, have fun. But you don't really need to answer things like Leyline of Sanctity or whatever anymore. If you do need to, Prismatic Ending hits it. But even without Ending, I wouldn't play that. Like, you don't need to beat everything. You just need to beat the most things. And I know that's like sort of difficult for some people to grasp, but you just want to beat the upper tier of the metagame. You don't need to beat every single corner case. It's okay to accept losing to weird decks if you're beating a higher percentage of the field, because ultimately your win percentage is what matters most, not beating every single archetype. All right, so we have Eye of Nowhere. I actually bought this year and got it signed by Alan Pollock, who lives in a suburb of the city that I live in. And I played Eye of Nowhere when I top 8 at Grand Prix Columbus, and I only used it once, and it was while showboating. I was in the middle of storming off. My opponent was being a little bit salty, so in the middle of it, I Burning Wisher Eye of Nowhere, bounced their land, and then continued winning. I effectively had a 14-card sideboard that weekend. So whenever I think of Eye of Nowhere, I think of, you know, the one time I got lucky a million years ago. Perilous Voyage. There was, at the time, people thought it was going to replace Echoing Truth because you could scry 2 when you bounce something. But just like the bouncing multiple permanents thing with Echoing Truth is just so much better than the potential to scry 2. And Echoing Truth is also just like another card that hasn't aged super well, because the way that games against prison decks work now is that they snowball. So they start on Deafening Silence, and then they play Thalia, and then they play Prelate, or you know what I mean? Like every single turn is another thing. Well, with Echoing Truth, if you want to bounce a Thalia, you have to wait till the end of their turn 3rd, and by then they've probably played 2 more hate pieces. So it's just really slow, and you want to change the tempo of the game. You want to break serve. So Echoing Truth ended up falling out of favor for things like Crash and Chain of Vapor, and then Crash was later on cut. Hurkyl's Recall. So these are once again reprints. I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm super interested in owning the original 10th edition Hurkyls. They're like $200, $250 each for a card that I never play. So yes, I could own 10th edition Hurkyls. I just don't care. I really don't. And I'm not saying that as someone who like has a strong opinion on this. It's just like, it's a card I'm never going to use, or if I do use, it's for like 2 months during an unhealthy metagame period. Even during the height of Eldrazi, I tested it and was like, this card just isn't worth it. So that's how I feel about Hurkyls. I ended up getting 2 more later on. So probably like 2018, 2019, when I started testing more Vintage, because I wanted the full playset for playing PO on Vintage. But for a long time, I only owned the 2, which is why I only have 2 copies signed. Dress Down. So like Veil of Summer, I bought these the second I could off of Haruya when they were released. I bought them for $2. I think like regular Dress Downs are like $6 now. I haven't checked the price on Japanese foils, but once again, if you think a card is remotely playable, just buy it once it comes out if you're interested in getting the higher end versions. Okay, Wipe Away. So there was this time period in like 2017, 2018 where I was a pure Grixis enthusiast with the Epic Storm. I did not want to play Abrupt Decay. There's a challenge that you could find here on this very YouTube channel if you go back far enough, where I was in the deck tech. I was talking about how you board in Wipe Away, board out Rite of Flame, board in Hope of Girpur. And then what happened is the event started, and all of a sudden my main deck had Wipe Away and Hope of Girpur in it, and I had 4 sideboard Rite of Flame. I top 8'd that challenge. So I'll always think of that whenever I think of Wipe Away. I can't help it. But yeah, so at the time it was for answering Counterbalance in Aethersworn Kinist out of blue decks without needing to play green for Abrupt Decay. My good friend Max Green, he sometimes still plays 1 in Doomsday nowadays. So you never know. Maybe one day, right? Rebuild. I don't know. This card's probably just worse than Hurkyl's, but I own one. That's the entire story behind it. Temporal Fissure. I've been trying to get this card signed for like a decade by Ed Beard, and I just haven't been able to do it. Ed only signs cards if you buy paintings from him, and I'm just not a painting enthusiast. I would pay Ed well to sign my card. He just doesn't want to. So if you live in Pittsburgh and are going to an Ed Beard event, let me know, because I'll send you this to get signed. Yeah, that's what I have to say. And then Extract. I guess I skipped over this, but I'll jump back. Extract. I did play this a little bit earlier this year for removing Thassa's Oracles from my opponent's Doomsday decks. And then Doomsday decks started playing 2 copies. And now we're back at this weird dance where you're like, do they play 1? Do they play 2? And I just don't think it's worth it. It is okay against Oops All spells, but that's assuming that you get to live. I don't know. Because like it doesn't do anything on the draw, right? So you can extract your opponent, but that means that they get to be on the play for the 3rd game. And then you'd also have to know game 1 that they're on Oops and do it proactively. Like, it's just not a good plan. and then Treasure Cruise. So there was a time period that was very short in 2016, maybe? No, it must have been earlier than that. 2014? Maybe, I think 2014 is when it got banned. Where I have a camera match against Zane Knapp where I Burning Wish for Treasure Cruise in the Epic Storm to draw 3 cards. So I paid 3, draw 3. It's like the most fair Treasure Cruise anyone had ever seen. But I did it. So if you're interested, you can go check out old Star City coverage. It should be here on this very website as well. So theepicstorm.com, if you go to the feature match stuff, there's a filter up here. Let's just do it. So Zane 2015. Okay, so I guessed wrong. But, you know, it happened there. So I mentioned cards going to the wrong address. That same thing happened with these Flusterstorms. And I sent these out for a group signing. The person that got them signed just shipped them back to me. Not their own fault. I had moved in the meantime. I thought I told them that I had moved, but I didn't. So these went to my old address. And I went back and knocked on their door because I was like, hey, the tracking says this was delivered like 3 days ago. And they're like, oh yeah, we have them. We opened your mail. And they just had like them sitting on like a coffee table. I ended up getting my Flusterstorms back. My former people that lived in my apartment or whatever, I ended up having them. It was a pretty good deal. I felt awkward. I knocked on their door at like 7 in the morning before I went to work to get these, and they just happened to be up and had my Flusterstorm. So it all worked out, but it was just a very weird experience. I skipped over this storm counter. I've never actually used this, but it's signed by Christopher Rush. I just feel like I shouldn't use it. I don't know why. It just sits in my storm binder and I look at it every once in a while. It's pretty cool. But I have my own storm counters and, well, it's Chris Rush signed. Do I really want to use it? Sorry, my throat's getting a little dry. I'm going to take a break and grab a drink here. If you haven't joined them already, I would recommend opening up our description down below and joining our 7 social media networks. They're each great in their own way, but I would strongly suggest joining our Discord server. In there, you will find others just like you looking to improve their Storm game and grow as a combo community. If you're a member of our YouTube channel, you should sync your account to Discord to unlock our private member section that has the latest and greatest deck lists, concepts, and much, much more. Let's get back to comboing out. Strike It Rich. So we tested this when it came out as a Rite of Flame replacement. Ultimately, we found it was not good enough. But hey, I've been using it in other formats. Vulcan Baga, beautiful signature. What I've got. Anthony Jones. I managed to do a few group signings with Anthony Jones over the years. The first one I had sent were these two. I own 2 copies. I sent them to Anthony. Anthony signed them with his own marker. Everything went super well. And everyone was really jealous that I got them signed because Anthony at the time was this like white whale. Like people wanted their Passing Flame signed. And, you know, I had gone to the promised land. And at the time, there was a few copies of like English foil Passing Flames that were signed. They were going for like $200 for a card that was like $25 unsigned. So I found a way through one of Anthony's coworkers to do a group signing. And when I had done the group signing, Anthony signed everything in a ballpoint pen. People were very angry at me. I had sent a Sharpie with the cards, didn't matter. Anthony just signed all the cards with a ballpoint pen. And people were furious. I got some very mean messages, but ultimately I did what I could. You can't force the artist to sign in marker. So I ended up doing a third signing in marker where I sent this one along with everyone else's cards to get signed. And when I did the third group signing, people are just nasty again. Like, you better do your job right here. If you don't, you'll be paying for my cards. And at that point, I just decided I was done with the signing stuff. Like, I was doing something as a favor to everyone else, and people just treated me really poorly. So I decided that I was done with that life. I haven't done a group signing with Anthony Jones since. I don't know if Anthony has signed cards since then. But yeah, be nice to the people that get your card signed. Mizzix Mastery. I got this signed by Dan Scott in person. This was one of those cards that we tested with in the in-between period that I talked about between Passing Flames and Echo of Aeons. Reforged the Soul. This was originally a card that people had very high hopes for as a diminishing returns replacement. I don't think it was ever good enough, but I tested it. That's the entire story. Grape shots, empties, we went through all that stuff. Goblin War Strike. So there was a time where during that whole Black Belcher period where I actually ran a Goblin War Strike for a few events. It was never good, but the times that I did get to use it, it felt so amazing. Because at the time we were always just like looking to fade that one turn where your opponent stabilized and played their Plague Engineer or their Toxic Deluge, whatever. And War Strike was just that little bit of extra oomph. I mean, I do have a few screenshots of me winning with it, but it wasn't that good. Pyroclasms. This one, Zane Knapp, who our good friend that I just searched for here, sold me this for I believe at the time for like $60, and they were like $70, $75 at the time, but it was already signed, which was a huge favor to me. So yeah, I mean, Pyroclasm is really cool, but by the time that I got this, I was no longer playing it. Like I actually used these Pyroclasms back when I used to play it. Owen Turtenwald top aided GP DC in like 2013 with Meddling Mage, Jeskai, Tempo. And at the time, I started playing Pyroclasms to combat all the Meddling Mages. I mean, they were fine for the time, but ultimately, I think Bounce Spells and Massacres probably would have been better. Cave In. I actually bought this year. It was already pre-signed on eBay. There was a big spike in the price of Cave In. Somebody had bought out all of the Cave Ins online, except for this one because it was signed. So I ended up buying this. It was like $38 shipped from France, but like English foil cave-ins on TCG, SCG, a bunch of different places, eBay, were all like all of a sudden $70. So spending $38 on a Japanese foil signed one seemed worth it to me. I'm probably never going to play it. I did record a video this week with Cave-In in it, but I can't imagine I would actually sleeve it up for a tournament at this point in my life. But you never know. Maybe the Epic Storm starts playing a bunch of red cards in the future and it all of a sudden becomes worthwhile. I don't know. But right now I'm playing Massacre. Meltdown made a really big resurgence this year because it answers two constructs from Urza's Saga plus the card that they then get it, so you 3-for-1 them. Really, it's like a 1-for-1 plus time, but Meltdown really came back. I had some people message me about if I'd be willing to sell these. The answer is no. My Storm cards really don't leave my collection, but if they do, you can find them on the epicstorm.com/shop, but usually there's not a whole lot in there. But I am off of work next week, so the week of between Christmas and New Year's, and I do plan on uploading some Japanese foils to the shop that I do plan on getting rid of. Like I own 7 Japanese foil brawls. I don't need to own that many. I'm never going to use that many. So stuff like that. So check back in a week. Byforce. I don't know. People, when this card came out, used to argue whether or not it was better than Meltdown. So I just decided to get a set. I got them signed at GP New Jersey in 2017. Crash. So this was a big change in philosophy at the time. I talked about breaking serve. And in 2018, we started testing Crash again because Chalice of the Void became popular in Death and Taxes and other decks. And that snowball effect, we were looking to just break serve. So I have a really awesome clip. If you were to try to buy a Crash from the Epic Storm shop, there's a clip that it's linked to our Twitter where my opponent goes turn 1, Ancient Tomb, Chalice of the Void for 1. I fetch for Volcanic, vote a blue, crash their Chalice, cast Brainstorm, hit the nuts, and then Tendrils for exactly 18 in one smooth motion. And it just kind of showed you what Crash had the potential to do, and that breaking the serve really did matter. So there was a long time that I played Crash up until Deafening Silence was printed in Throne of Eldraine, and all of a sudden not being able to answer Deafening Silence was a big hit against it. So we ultimately quit playing Crash. And I mentioned earlier on in this video, Alex Bernacini signed my Cheaty Face. Well, same artist here, Doug Chaffee. So instead, I had my 4 favorite The Epic Storm pilots throughout history sign these. So we have Landon Swartz, AJ Kerrigan, Alex McKinley, and the Anthony Laverde. I love you guys. You're all great. Pulverize, the Pink Elephant, signed by Scott Fisher. So Scott is an awesome person. I'm not going to go get it right now. I probably could. But I have a huge, like 24 by 36 print of Burning Wish. And I got this signed with those. One year for the holiday gift for the site, I bought Burning Wish prints off Scott Fisher, and Scott signed them all, Keep Storming. And when I asked Scott for the prints, Scott said, because the Scott's site had a bunch of artist prints on there, but didn't have Burning Wish. So I contacted Scott and I asked, and he's like, "Oh, I actually don't have permission to print it. Let me contact Wizards." So Scott contacted Wizards, got the art file, and now sells the Burning Wish prints through the site. But at the time, mine were the first ever printed. Scott signed them, and Scott was just really great about everything. So shout out to Scott Fisher. I'm like losing my ability to talk right now. Just like talking for like 2 hours straight here. Shattering Spree, Pat Lee. There's rumors that there's like a bunch of different Pat Lees that are willing to sign this card. I don't know if I'll ever get the real Pat Lee to sign it. I don't know. It's just like I've seen a bunch of forgeries. I've seen people say that it's the wrong Pat Lee. I don't know how to feel. Rending Volley. I actually own 3 of these, but it just didn't work with the amount of red cards, so I only uploaded 2. There's a short time period where I used this in my Pure Grixis list to answer a Thirstworn Canonist instead of running green for Abrupt Decay. That's the entire story behind that. And then my copies of Pyroblast. So these are the original signature from Lake Hurwitz, who also did Veil of Summer. And then these are the secondary signature, the second signature. And I think that this just looks so much sweeter. So I ended up buying another set to get them signed. Not that this signature is bad, but this signature is just way better. So I ended up going with this. And I keep one set in my Pauper deck and another set in my Vintage deck at the moment. But occasionally I do play them in the Epic Storm. Ave Progenitor Ooze. I contacted Andrew Marr immediately upon buying these, being like, "Hey, would you be willing to sign these?" And Andrew's just like, "I'm not really interested in signing cards." I hope that changes one day. No hard feelings, but I would like to get them signed. I know that they live in Austin, Texas. Maybe they do art events down there. If you're going to one, let me know. I'd love to get these signed. They're not worth much. Like literally, these were $1 each. So if you scam me, you scam me, but I hope you don't. I'd really like to get these signed. Chatterstorm. I missed the signing on these this year. It was my own dumb fault. I just wasn't paying attention, and now I have to wait another year to get these signed, but maybe one day I'll play them. Xanid Swarm. These cards for a long time were super, super rare. I ended up spending way too much money on these just because whenever one popped up on eBay, they would just disappear like immediately. So they started at like 180, and then they jumped to 250. And before you know it, I was in bidding wars with other people. I ended up winning like 2 of the 3 of these for like $350 each. And then the first one I ended up winning for like 120. But the price on these was just like so wild at the time because you had these Belcher players also bidding on them. You had Ant players bidding on them. And they're just so rare. I've seen some for sale since then, and they're like 220, 240. Because like there's less people that need them now. But yeah, I don't know if I'll ever go back to Xanid Swarm. So I'm a big fan of Hopa Gearper, but both Hopa Gearper and Xanid Swarm suffer from the same problem that Prismatic Ending is now just like this universal catch-all for everything. So those effects just aren't that good anymore. But at least Hopa Gearper turns on Mox Opal. Xanid Swarm has its own pros, like it doesn't need to connect, but I just don't think I'm ever going to play either, but who knows? Maybe Ending leaves the format, or maybe there's a reason not to run white anymore, and Ending takes a big dip. I don't know. Reverent Silence. Don Hazeltine for a long time did not sign cards, and then he did, so I got mine signed. Took like a year to come home, but I got it signed. Carpet of Flowers. Alex McKinley's love letter to the Epic Storm. Alex is by far the person that loves Carpet of Flowers the most and convinced me to test these again. I was really against it because I had these memories of testing Carpet back in 2012, 2013 during the height of Rug Delver and Legacy, and they were just so bad. Because they had Daze, they had Stifle, a bunch of different things, you know. And I think at the time they were actually also playing Rushing River. So like they would sack their lands and monster stuff. Like it just wasn't good. And Alex convinced me during the Dreadhorde era to test it again. And it was just like the secret weapon the Epic Storm all of a sudden had to bury the Dreadhorde decks. And it was really good. And the only reason we cut it is that Prismatic Ending just, you know, once again, clean removal spell to everything for 1 mana. So Carpet ended up not being as good as it used to be. And if you're interested, Rebecca Guay does sign via mail. But no matter what, Rebecca Guay charges $50. So it doesn't matter if you get 1 card signed, and you can get up to 20 signed, but it's $50 for 1 or $50 for 20. Take advantage of it. Silence, Wayne Reynolds. I did get these signed by Wayne back in like 2012 or 2013. I don't know if Wayne still signs by mail, but they live in London or England, somewhere in there. I don't know if it's actually London, I misspoke, but somewhere in, the greater United Kingdom, if you're interested in getting your card signed. The Brandon Chang Orms Chant. Alan Williams signed a Revoke Existence. There was a time period where I thought that maybe this was the answer to Leyline of Sanctity was really popular for a short stint in Sneak and Show, and I was like, maybe I'll run Revoke Existence, and I bought one. That's the entire story. It wasn't good. Clean Fall. There was a long time that I couldn't find a Japanese foil one of this, so to me, the fact that I own it kind of makes me smile a little bit, just because I ran a non-foil one for a long time. And the reason that I ran this over Tranquility was that you could cast it off imprinted silences on Chromox against the Enchantress decks that were really popular at the time. I eventually found a Japanese foil one in a bulk bin, but it took me several years to find it. And by the time that I did, I didn't play the card anymore. So Parceline is similar, where this came out years after I ever played this effect, but I wanted to own it because it was a strictly better version of this. So I just got one eventually. Plus, it's beautiful art by Ryan Yee. Consigned to Oblivion. Siddharth signed by mail. They were super nice about it. This was probably the last signing I ever did. And I only did a small one for people that were a part of the Epic Storm Facebook group. Not a big story there or anything. I just got them signed. And I think I actually required people to buy the ones off me that I had purchased first. So there was no sending to me. You were just buying the ones that I had purchased to get signed or something like that. But I'm just never going to do group signings again. It's so messy. You have to ship to all these different people. People treat you poorly. It's a lot of work. Extra copies of Abrupt Decay. Full Breach. I bought this signed for literally $2 at a Jupiter Games event in 2011. I was just like, this card is way too sweet to be in this bin for $2. So I purchased it. I've actually played it a few times over the years. I played it once during the Miracles era, and then again when I started testing real 4-color the Epic Storm with Taiga in it. It wasn't good enough, but hey, it doesn't hurt to test things out again, right? Carpet of Flowers came back. You never know about Hull Breach. Luris. So when we played Luris in the Epic Storm during the Companion era, we were too afraid to test Bobble. We thought it wasn't fast enough at the time. And then later on, we tested Bobble and found that we actually liked it. So maybe we didn't test it enough, or maybe the non-companion metagame slowed down that Bobble was good enough. I'm not sure. I'm really not. But I would like to get Ice Age Bobbles. They're just really, really difficult to find. I need them for my Modern deck. Sometimes I play them in Legacy. I would like to own them, but I just haven't been able to find them. And finding one and then finding two, I'd really like to find a full playset. So if you have a full playset and you're thinking about selling it, hit me up. Tormod's Crypts. My good friend Juan Valdez owned these and was looking to get rid of them. We struck a deal. I was playing 2 at the time because it turns on Mox Opal over Surgical Extraction. It was during another height of Reanimator. And Juan sold me these. I don't know. These are impossible to find. Post Christopher Rush death, they're signed. Just so you know, also the time shifted foils were super rare. So you're getting a super rare, and then on top of it, it's Japanese foil, and then it's also signed by a dead person. And Juan didn't try to nickel and dime me on these. He gave me a really good deal, and Juan, I appreciate you. Yeah, because I contacted other people, and they were giving me. So there's a few people that I contacted. One of them had another real set like this, and they wanted $2,200. And I was like, that is so much money. I can't afford that for Tormod's Crypts. And then another person told me $1,500, and they were definitely forged. They were not real signatures. They had done the Chris Rush trace signature thing. And I was like, I'm going to pass on this. And Juan's price was, even way less than even that $1,500. So Juan, I do appreciate you. I'm probably never, ever going to get rid of these Tormod's Crypts. They're going to die with me owning them. I just love them so much. Defense Grid. So here you can see 2 of the same signatures, 2 of the same signatures. Once again, I did not buy 4 originally. These were cards that I bought in 2 pairs. So I own 2 from playing decks over the years. I played it in the Epic Storm for a short period. like 2008 or 2009, and I owned them from that. And then once we started like the Veil of Summer, the Epic Storm, where we were playing 4 Veils, 4 grid, or 2 grids, Kai Sawatari played a list with 3 grid, 3 Veil, and then 4 grid, 2 Veil, and convinced me to buy 2 more. And those are these 2 that ended up getting signed later because the marker is a little bit better on these. And after I had bought them, I bought them for like 110 each. All of a sudden, over COVID, defense grid spiked for, I'm guessing, commander reasons. And now like English foil defense grids are like 350, 370, somewhere in there. So I don't know what these are worth anymore, but they're a boatload of money. And Kai Sawatari convinced me to buy more. So Kai, thank you. You're beautiful, and I appreciate you. Gear. So I fell in love with this card for a short period of time in 2018, 2019. And it was part of the big reason why I started testing Mox Opal more and more. I've wrote a bunch about it. I've made videos on it. If you're interested, go check those out. But this was one of my favorite cards for a period of time. And I sent these out to get signed. But what had happened was the signing was delayed. And all of a sudden, the signing was pushed back a full year. And then the artist took almost a year to get back. So by the time that I got these back, it was like almost 2 years later. It wasn't quite. It was like a year and 3/4, but I was no longer playing Gear by the time that I got it back because Ice Fang Coatl came out and Ice Fang just wrecked it, and then Prismatic Ending happened. So I don't know if I'll ever play these again, but they hold a special place in my heart. They led the way to me playing Mox Opal in the Epic Storm. Cards of a different era. So this was the original Helm of Awakening that I played in the Epic Storm back during when I was like first gold fishing lists in like 2006. Because back then the deck played like a bunch of Chromatic Star effects, or Chromatic Sphere, I'm sorry. And Helm was just a very popular card in Legacy Combo because your cards back then weren't as good. So you did have Cabal Ritual, but the decks that used it never got Threshold because they were always looking to win the game first. There was a deck called Nausea that was a Helm of Awakening land grant deck that also played City of Traders. And when I first built the Epic Storm, it was heavily influenced on Helm and Nausea. So this card just reminds me of that weird era of 2004, 2005 Legacy Combo. Pithing Needle, these are not the originals. I was cheap, and I did have an original at one point, but I sold it so I could buy other cards I needed for the Epic Storm. But I have reprint foils now. I'm sorry, they're not the originals. But I used them to stop Griselbrand and Wasteland during the Probe era, but it was like early Probe era. It was like 2013, 2014. And I was also sold on the idea that you could needle top. So you would probe your opponent, see what they were playing. You could needle Wasteland, Griselbrand, or top, and it was pretty good as like a sideboard option. So I tried that for a little bit. It was fine, but it was never as good as we wanted it to be. But there were a few matches that I stole, naming top against Miracles, and then just having their counterbalance be terrible. All right, we're in the home stretch. Thank you if you've been watching this long. I've had to take 2 drink breaks so far. I'm going to try to go without a third. Misty Rainforest, Shelly Wan did a signing last year, I believe it was, and I think they turned out okay enough. She's only signed a few times throughout history, so I'm not going to complain if the signatures aren't exactly perfect, but I think they're okay enough. So I actually really like the Khans fetch lands, but when I ran them, people would fetch shame me all the time. Like, I think the art on the Khans fetch lands is secretly better than the originals, and I'm a web designer, so I care a lot about accessibility. And the new fetches are just so much better at that than the old card frame, but no one would ever listen to me when I said this. They're just like, no, old is better, old is better. And I felt peer pressured into getting these fetches up here. I actually do like these, don't get me wrong, they're really nice, but I also really like the Khans ones. But no one would ever let me hear that. They're like, no, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. So I eventually just broke and got the originals, but I still love the Khans fetches. I'm not even just saying that, I really do. So these were what I ran for a little bit. And I still love them. But it secretly bothers me that when I look at these, the signature scales. Like, I don't know why Vince Pross did this, but large, medium, small. Drives me nuts. So it is what it is. I'm not going to complain too much. I do use these in other decks sometimes. And then Darken again. You can contact via the whatever. Delta, or Myers. I'm sorry, Myers. I got these around the same time period that I did the Thought Seizes. around the same ballpark in price too. So glad that I got these. These are like almost $2,000 each now, and I spent a quarter of that, maybe even less, on a few of them. They're just super hard to find these nowadays, and I'm never going to get rid of them. So it is what it is. Most of these cards, by the way, like I just don't get rid of my Storm cards. They're a part of my collection. It's just how it works. I'm actually like I'm just at a more financially stable point in my life. I'm about to pay off my student loans next week. Knock on wood. And you know, there's time periods in my life where I needed to sell stuff to like pay rent and keep food and stuff, but I'm just, I'm not gonna get into it. Sculling turns, I covered those. Duels, invasion basics. So invasion was my first set, and really early on in my Magic career, I decided I was going to pick basic lands from invasion and just use them forever. So these invasion lands, I've literally used the entire 20 years that I've played Magic the Gathering. These basics are basic lands to me. So I've used this invasion land, this invasion island for 20 years, this swamp for 20 years. I have like 375 of this basic foil. Like 75 of them are Japanese foil. Like I've just been collecting them my entire Magic career. So I understand there's some controversy around Therese nowadays. That doesn't escape me, I'm aware. But to me, it's not about the artist. It's about me loving this basic land that I've used the entire time that I've played Magic. Please don't hate me over this. It's just this island is Magic the Gathering to me. So sometimes you just have to separate the art from the artist. All right, so the Snowlands, there was a time period where we were testing Astrolabe in the Epic Storm. I didn't scan my Astrolabes. I don't know why. I still own them. But these are from when we were trying Snowstorm. Astrolabe was never quite good enough despite turning on Mox Opal. It's just, it competed with the Rite of Flame slot, and when you took out Rite of Flame, you're often late on mana, and then you still had to play some number of duels, and then you'd open up on hands that couldn't cast the Astrolabe because you had like Chromox, Lotus Petal, Volcanic Island. It just wasn't great. And then Mox Opal lands, we have our Seats and our Vault of Whispers. I actually sent cards to John Avon this year to get signed, but the Seat wasn't on my need to get signed list, so I just didn't send it. So scanning these, I noticed that it was missing. I added it to that list, so hopefully I'll get it signed in the future. Gemstone Mine, I've literally owned these. These are also Jason Jaco cards that I got back in like 2006 or 7. But I've owned these the entire time I've played the Epic Storm. They were cut sometime in 2014 when we went to a full fetch mana base, but they were around for a long time. A long time. I love Gemstone Mine. Probably never going to come back, if I'm being completely honest. Mox Opal does a lot of what Gemstone Mine used to do while still allowing you to play a full fetch mana base. So I included these in here because when this set first came out, I mentioned to the Epic Storm private group chat, hey, I think this card could be playable. It's a backup wing condition. It gets Lion's Eye Diamond. I was laughed out of the chat. You're going to play a colorless land in your 4-color deck? Like, literally just laughed, like, super hard at. I was like, well, you can accelerate into using the constructs on turn 2. It could be really good. Just, like, no one wanted to hear it. I was wrong. I was an idiot. And now Urza Saga is just this broken land that everyone's trying to fit into everything. And Alex McKinley did some testing later on in time. And Alex did more testing than what I originally did. Shout outs to Alex. But Alex tried for a solid, like, week and a half to play this in the Epic Storm, and it just didn't go well. So all those people laughing at me might have been right. That said, maybe one day Urza Saga is good enough to make the cut. Who knows? Caracas. When I first bought these, I didn't realize that the EMA Caracas existed. So I bought this Ultimate Masters one. And then later on found out that this one existed and went and bought this because it's the original Japanese foil printing. And then Drew Baker lives in Rochester, New York, which is the next city over, and was willing to sign these over COVID. So thank you to Drew. But the idea is that you can just tutor for it with Wishclaw Talisman to bounce Athalia for a single mana, which is the activation of the Wishclaw. I did play it for a little bit during the Luris era, but haven't played it since. You never know. Maybe Legends get so popular at some point that the Crocus becomes worth playing again. Thank you to Roland Chang. Roland sent me this for beating him in 90s MTG. So Roland said that I was the new monarch, I was the king, and I had to get it signed. So thank you to Roland. Great person. a few artist proofs. I know that I've literally never played dragons in the Epic Storm, but I like looking at this stuff, so I uploaded it. Same thing with the dinosaur. Mark Brill sent these back with one of my Empty the Orange shipments. It's the dad from the show Dinosaurs, What's Not to Love. I mean, how sweet is that? And here's another Mark Brill sketch. Mark Brill just did this on his own. I didn't pay for this. He was just thankful for the tip that I gave him. So I have this sweet token. I don't actually use these though, because like they're just too nice. So I keep them in my storm binders and I just look at them. Ave Progenitor Ooze tokens. I need to get these signed. Same thing with these. There was a signing for these, but I missed it. So sometimes I'm not good at keeping up with the signings and I just miss them. These are construct tokens for Urza Saga, and then the treasure tokens for Strike It Rich. RK Post tokens. I don't actually use these anymore, but these are what I used for years before I made my own The Epic Storm token pack. So sometimes I like looking at these and reminiscing. And then the original Pete Venter Goblin tokens. If you're interested, the mini token pack, hard perk fits, these are all things that I actually use. I'm about to show you what they are in just a minute, because I'm going to show you my physical copy of the deck. But if you're interested, these are affiliate links. I am not sponsored by anyone to show these products. These are products that I genuinely think are great. If you're interested in getting them, click on them, check them out. I promise that they're worth it. And then these are additional links. I might hide these until each video is live, but if you check back at the end of the 2 weeks, these will all be here and they will link you to the other videos. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I'm about to show you my physical copy of all these accessories. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to click that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. That said, there's no better way of showing your support than becoming a member of this channel. You get sweet perks, and we get to keep making combo content. The perks get better and better each level you go up. They also stack. To start off, with our Storm Fan tier, you unlock our private members section of our Discord, which comes with a highlighted user profile and then some awesome badges and emotes for YouTube. Looking for Sideboard help? Become a Stormtrooper, our middle tier, for 2 Sideboard guides of your deck choice every single month, on top of 50% off donation decks. Did we mention you also get 10% off merchandise from our shop? With our top tier, the Combo Cabal, you get a free donation deck every single month, 15% off merchandise from our shop, early access to private deck lists, and the most valuable perk in my opinion, videos early. That's right, you heard it, early access to all videos. But maybe sweet perk, secret deck list, early access to videos isn't for you, but you'd still like to show your appreciation. Make sure to check out theepicstorm.com/shop for card singles and Storm swag. Please don't forget to use your membership discounts. Finally, if you want to see your combo deck here on this very YouTube channel, make sure to visit theepicstorm.com/donation decks, where all you have to do is attach your TXT file and pick a donation tier. With our Epic tier, you can even join me in a video to showcase your bold brew in person and explain the ins and outs of your strategy. Card availability won't be an issue due to our new sponsor, Card Hoarder. With Card Hoarder, renting is super easy. If you're looking to get into Magic Online, there isn't a better, more affordable solution than Card Hoarder. Fun fact, you can rent the Epic Storm for 7 tickets a week, which is just a great deal. There are many ways you can support us. Just pick whatever is best for you. Alright, so I'm back, and I'm not going to get to do what I had planned, and I'm sorry for that. OBS Ninja just isn't working right now. I was going to set it up so that way you had an aerial view of everything I was going to display. So I think I'm just going to make this short and sweet. This is the Dex Protection Medium Deck Box. This is what I use for the Epic Storm. Once again, not being sponsored. I just think that this is a great product. So when you open it, pretty simple. Silica packet that I got from like an old TV that I bought. You know, take that out. And here, tokens and deck. I do keep a thick amount of tokens in here. There's 20 Japanese Little Goblin tokens in there, plus all the other middle sideboard dividers that you saw in there. That keeps this nice and tight. I'll get it up here so you can see. Nice and tight. So that way the cards stay flat, because that is something that helps them stay flat. So hard perfects and then tight in the deck box. From there, I have these big silly clear dice. There's nothing special about these at all. So these are just something that a friend gave me a long time ago, and in honor to remember that friend, I use them in all of my Magic the Gathering decks. And then Sideboard Guide fits nicely in here that you can print off from the homepage of theepicstorm.com/shop. And then, you know, our mini tokens. Sorry, I can't talk. Mini token pack, you can grab these from theepicstorm.com/shop. Slime time on the back. They can't see them because they're green probably. Oh yeah, look at that, nice and clear. But slime time, you can grab those. Theepicstorm.com/shop. I'm sorry that I'm cutting this short. I was going to do something much better, but this has been a long video and I'm sick of talking and losing my voice. Thank you for watching. Keep storming. Hey, Bryant Cook here. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, but also follow the social media channels down below. If you want to support this content directly, I would recommend going to theepicstorm.com/shop. And if you need a little bit of assistance with the Epic Storm to get to that next level, I would recommend going to theepicstorm.com/tutoring. Don't worry, there's more great content coming right up.